Chapter 14. Sweat. 15 laps of a 400-metre track is 6 kilometres. James had no time limit. He could walk it in about an hour, but that was boring. He wanted to go fast. The first day he raced off and died after 3 laps. He staggered the rest of the way, with his legs aching, and it took nearly an hour and a quarter. Next morning, James's ankles were puffed up, and even walking was agony. Merrill Spencer showed James warm-up and cool-down stretches, and told him only to run every 3rd lap, then gradually to move up, running a lap and a half out of every 3, then 2 out of 3, and so on until he could run the 6 kilometres without a rest. The 3rd day, it rained so hard James could hardly see through the wet hair stuck to his face. Merrill and the other athletics coach hid in the dry. James figured nobody was watching, and after 13 laps went into the changing room where the other drowned rat kids were diving under the shower. "Was that 15 laps?" Merrill asked. James knew he was busted, just from her voice. "Come on, it's belting down, miss." "You cheat, James. You start again. 15 laps. Get going." "What?" "You heard me, James. One smart word and I'll make it 30 laps. By the end, James's lungs felt like they were going to explode. Kyle and Bruce thought it was superb when James told them what had happened. Amy said it was good to learn early that discipline at CHERUB was stricter than James was used to. A fortnight later, James was getting fitter. He could run 2 laps out of every 3 fast and jog the other one. It was Friday, lap 15. The pulse in his neck felt like it was about to burst. His body was begging him to quit, but James wanted to do his laps in under half an hour for the first time, and he wasn't giving in so close to the end. James overtook a set of identical twins on the final bend and sprinted to the line. He glanced at his stopwatch. 29 minutes, 47 seconds. 20 seconds inside his previous best. As James looked at the watch, he put a foot down awkwardly and overbalanced. The track slashed the skin off his knee, ripped his t-shirt and grazed his shoulder. The pain from the cuts wasn't as bad as the pain in his lungs, but James didn't care, because he'd broken half an hour. James clamped his hand over his knee. The twins stopped to help. "You okay?" one of them asked. "Fine," James lied. James hadn't seen them before. He noticed they were wearing pale blue shirts. "You two start basic training week after next?" "Yeah, we arrived last night. I'm Callum, this is Connor. You want us to help you back to the changing room?" "I'll manage," James said. "It's my birthday today," Amy said. They were in the pool together. James's cuts were stinging from the chlorine. "How old?" James asked. 16. "I would have got you a card or something," James said. "You never said." "I'm having a little gathering. Just a few friends in my room this evening. Want to come?" "Sure," James said. James was more excited about going to Amy's party than he would admit. He liked her a lot. She was funny and beautiful. He was sure Amy liked him, but like a little brother, not a mate. "You have to do something first, though." "How far?" James asked. "From the steps in the middle of the pool on that side to the opposite corner." "That's almost a length." "Almost? You can do it, James. Your stroke is getting stronger. Basic training starts in 9 days, and if you don't make it, it's 3 months until the next course starts. I'll have 3 months to learn how to swim. That's not bad." "They'll put you in a red t-shirt," Amy said. "I'm 12. Red is for little kids." "No, James. Red shirts are for kids who are not qualified for training. Mostly that's because they're too young, but in your case it will be because you can't swim." "I'll be 2 years older than anyone else in a red shirt. I'll be slaughtered." "James, I'm not trying to pressure you, but if you have to spend 3 months in a red shirt, your life won't be a lot of fun." "You are trying to pressure me," James said. "On the bright side, James, red shirt kids are allowed to keep a gerbil or a hamster in their rooms." Well, funny, Amy, James laughed, but he knew this was serious. Kyle, Bruce, and everyone else would wet themselves laughing if they put him in a red t-shirt. James started walking through the water towards the steps, determined to swim further than before. He managed. Amy gave him a hug. "You'll be okay, James." James wasn't so confident. Amy's door was wedged open, and you could hear her stereo as you stepped out of the lift. The room was crammed with people, and more lined the corridor outside. Everyone was dressed in normal clothes. After 2 weeks on campus, seeing people in olive trousers and boots, James had almost forgotten skirts existed. Amy had on bright pink lipstick that matched her miniskirt. James felt self-conscious because everyone was older, and he didn't know anyone. Amy spun around when she saw James. She had a cigarette in one hand and a can of beer in the other. She gave James a kiss on the cheek, leaving a blur of lipstick. "Hey, James," Amy said. "I don't think I'll be in any state for a swimming lesson tomorrow morning." "Is this the kid who can't swim?" a guy sitting on the floor asked loudly. Everyone heard. James thought people were looking at him thinking he was a wimp. "You want a beer, kid?" a guy sitting by Amy's fridge asked. James didn't know what to say. If he said yes, everyone might laugh because they thought he was too young. If he said no, he'd look soft. James picked yes. Nobody laughed at him. James caught the can and pulled the tab. Amy grabbed it out of his hand. "Don't give him beer, Charles. He's only 12. "Come on, Amy," Charles said. "Let's get the little kid drunk. It's always a laugh." Amy smiled and handed James the can. "1 can, James," Amy said. "No more. And don't tell anyone we let you have it." Once, James had sneaked 2 of Uncle Ron's beers and got a bit drunk, but this was way beyond that. Amy's girlfriends all loved James. They kept giving him more beer. James blushed when one of them kissed him, so they all kissed him until his face was a mass of lipstick smears. As they got drunker, one of the girls decided it would be funny to give him a love bite. They tickled James until he gave in. He knew he wasn't much more than their drunken pet, but it was fun being the centre of attention. Some of the kids on Amy's floor complained about the racket, so the party had to move outside. It was midnight now, and pitch dark. James followed the noise from Amy's portable CD player. "Wait for me!" James shouted. "Busting to piss!" James wandered into a bunch of trees. Suddenly, there wasn't any ground under his trainers. His heart shot into his mouth as he lost his balance. He slid 2 meters down an embankment and crashed into a muddy ditch. James dragged himself up, spitting nasty, tasting water out of his mouth. His sweatshirt was ripped. He shouted for help, but the others couldn't hear over Amy's music. By the time James scrambled back up the embankment, there was no sign of anyone. Campus was bigger than James realised. He got totally lost trying to find the main building. He felt sick from all the beer and started to panic. When he finally sighted the changing room at the edge of the athletics track, he was thrilled. James peered in the window. The lights were off. He tried the door. It wasn't locked. James crept in. The heating was off, but it was still warmer than outside. James rubbed his hands together to try and get some feeling back in. He found a bank of switches and flipped on the light in the boys' changing room. He left the others off. Any light shining through the frosted windows might have caught someone's attention. James looked at himself now he could see, and was gutted. He'd put his best clothes on for the party. An almost new pair of Nike Air trainers and some diesel jeans. The bottom of the jeans had mud soaked through them, and the trainers were a wet mess, coated with mud. James knew the route back to his room from here, but there could be awkward questions if he got seen like this. He had to tidy himself up. James kicked his trainers off to avoid marking the floor. He went into the boys' changing room. Fear of getting caught had sobered him up a bit. The changing room was a mess. There was sweat in the air, and quite a few bits of clothing tossed about. James found a grey CHERUB t-shirt scrunched up under a bench. It smelled nasty, but it was less suspicious than walking into the main building in a torn sweatshirt. James pulled it on. There were no clean tracksuit bottoms to replace the muddy jeans, so James pushed his jeans down his waist and turned the bottoms up so the muddiest area looked small. All he needed now was some trainers that wouldn't spread mud everywhere. There were a few running spikes laying around, but they'd be no good indoors. James stepped across the hallway into the girls' changing room. He hadn't been in here before, of course. The difference from the boys' room was amazing. It smelled fresh. There was a counter stocked up with toiletries and perfumes. Best of all, there were 2 pairs of trainers on top of the lockers. One pair was James's size, but pink. The other pair was smaller, but James could easily hobble a couple of 100 meters through the main building in them. He squeezed them on. He caught himself in the mirror and realized his face was filthy. He wished Kyle could see all the lipstick marks. James damped a towel, scrubbed his face and hands, gave the smelly t-shirt a blast with deodorant, and gargled mouthwash to mask the smell of beer. He did a final inspection. Not bad. If anyone asked why he was out so late, James decided to say he couldn't sleep, went for a walk, and got lost. The only thing that might be tricky was explaining why he was wearing the wrong colour t-shirt. James stepped into the corridor. A hand clamped his ankle. James shot about a metre in the air with fright. "Caught you in the girls' changing room, pervert!" James didn't recognise the voice. Torch beams lit up his face. Amy, and the girl who'd given him the love bite, burst out laughing. They had changed out of party clothes into uniform. "Why are you hanging around the girls' changing room, James?" Amy asked. James panicked. It was so embarrassing. "I couldn't go back in the main building all muddy, so I came in here to clean up." "We're pulling your leg," Amy said. "I saw the light was on. We've been watching you for about 5 minutes. When I realised you didn't make it back, we came out looking." James smiled with relief. "I really thought you were going to tell everyone I was a pervert." "We still might," the love bite girl giggled. "Next time you say I only have one drink, Amy, I will. I swear." "What makes you think I'll invite you next time?" "I know a back way into the main building. Let's not hang around here." "You saved my life, Amy. Thanks." Amy laughed. "If you turned up drunk after half the school saw you at my party, I'd be in as much trouble as you." Chapter 15. Town. James swore he'd never drink again. It was a rough night. Throwing up, head floating, dry mouth, and a throat like sandpaper. Luckily, it was only 3 steps to the bathroom. It was 3 a.m. before James settled into an uneasy sleep. He kept jerking awake from weird dreams where everything was spinning. "James!" Kyle shouted. It was 7 a.m., Saturday morning. "Wake up, man!" James sat up in bed, rubbing his eyes. "You got drunk, didn't you?" Kyle said. "Ugh. This room stinks of beer." "I feel like I'm dying," James groaned. "How did you get in here?" "Pick the lock." "I did knock first, but you didn't answer." "Can't you leave me to die?" "James, shut up and listen. There's a mission in London tonight. 9 of us are spending the day up there hanging out. You're not supposed to come, but it's all been thrown together at the last minute, and it's a Dennis King production, so we can smuggle you onto the train." "What's a Dennis King production?" "He's one of the mission controllers," Kyle explained. "He's a sweet old guy, but he's a bit doddery, and he'll never notice an extra kid tagging along." "I've got a hangover," James said. "I'm sick of always getting into trouble." "Don't you want to visit your sister then?" "How will we do that?" James asked, excitedly kicking off his duvet and swinging out of bed. "Ron won't let me in the flat." "If Lauren's home, we'll find a way. I wanted to help you visit her when we were at Nebraska House, but I couldn't without breaking my cover. This is your only chance. Once you start basic training, you're cut off from everything for 3 months. When are we leaving? James asked. 20 minutes. Have a quick shower, put on civilian clothes, and get your butt downstairs. It was weird being back. London seemed dirty and noisy, even though James had lived here until a few weeks before. The kids all split up when they arrived at King's Cross Station. A bunch of girls were going shopping in Oxford Street. Most boys in the group were going to Namco Station, a big amusement arcade opposite Big Ben. They all had to meet outside Edgware Underground at 6 p.m. for the mission. Bruce wanted to go to Namco, but decided to stay with Kyle and James once he heard what they were doing. You'll get bored, Kyle said. We're just going to James's old neighbourhood to visit his little sister. You might need me for protection, Bruce said. Kyle laughed. Protection from what, Bruce? Come if you want. Just don't whine all day if you get bored. Bruce had never been on the underground before. He looked at the map and counted how many stops like a 5-year-old. Ron lived behind Kentish Town Station, a couple of streets from the estate where James used to live with his mum. What do we do? James asked when they reached the flat. Ring the doorbell, Bruce said. Ron won't let me in, dummy, James said. I wouldn't need you guys if I could just ring the doorbell and get in. Oh, Bruce said. I could kick the door down. Like his stepdad isn't going to notice somebody kicking his front door down, Kyle said sarcastically. What's your sister likely to be doing if she's inside? Either drawing in her room or watching TV, James said. And Ron? He'll have been out drinking last night. Probably won't be out of bed for another hour. Kyle stuck his lock gun in the keyhole. He turned the lock, but the door wouldn't budge. Bolt on the inside, Kyle explained. Ring the doorbell, Bruce said again. We can't, I just told you, James said. You and Kyle hide, I'll ring the doorbell, Bruce said. You said your stepdad is probably asleep, so I bet your sister answers. If she answers, I'll say what's going on. If Ron answers, I'll tell him I've made a mistake. Kyle and James walked away. Bruce rang the bell. A few seconds later, Lauren's eyes appeared in the letterbox. How many packets do you want? Lauren asked. I'm a friend of your brother James. Is your dad awake? You don't want cigarettes? Lauren asked. Bruce waved for James to come to the door. James crouched at the letterbox. Let us in, James said. James, Lauren grinned. You better not let Dad see you. Every time I mention your name, he looks like his head's going to explode. Lauren undid a bolt on the bottom of the door. Is Ron asleep? James asked. Won't get up until the horse racing starts, Lauren said, opening the door. Hide us in your room, James said. Lauren led the boys into her bedroom. The room was divided by a curved wall built out of thousands of cigarette cartons. What's all this? James asked. You started smoking? Dad buys them cheap in France, Lauren said. He smuggles them in and sells them. He's making loads of money. Bruce studied the wall of cartons. Did you build this? Yeah, Lauren said. I was bored, so I started messing about with the cartons. Bruce laughed. It's brilliant. She always messes with stuff, James said. When she had chicken pox, she got every CD and video case in our flat and used it to make a pyramid. Lauren sat down on her bed. So, what are you up to? James asked. I go round with the kids down the balcony a lot. Ron gives their mum money, and she gets me from school and makes my dinner. So you're doing okay? Could be worse, Lauren said. You been in any more trouble? No, James said. Kyle and Bruce both grinned. Pants on fire, Kyle muttered under his breath. So you want to go out or something? James asked. Can you sneak out? Easy, Lauren said. Dad doesn't like me waking him up. I'll write a note to say I'm round at a mate's house. James took Lauren shopping and got her some jeans she wanted in Gap Kids. They ate pizza and went 10-pin bowling. James and Lauren versus Bruce and Kyle. It started getting dark, but they still had an hour to kill before they headed up to Edgware for the mission. They ended up in the little swing park near James's flat. James hadn't been back there since he'd hidden in the tunnel the afternoon before his mum died. Kyle and Bruce mucked about trying to make each other dizzy on a roundabout. Lauren and James sat next to each other on the swings, swaying gently and dragging their trainers in the gravel. They both felt a bit sad, knowing that their day together was running out. "Mum used to take us here when we were little," James said. Lauren nodded. "She was good fun when she wasn't in a mood." "Remember when you used to climb up the slide, but you could never work out how to sit your bum down and push yourself off the top? I always had to climb up and rescue you." "No," Lauren said. "How old was I?" "Only 2 or 3, James said. "You know, I can't come back to London till after Christmas." "Oh," Lauren said. They tried not to make eye contact in case they made each other upset. "That doesn't get you out of buying me a present," Lauren said. James smiled. "Are you getting me one? You can have a box of cigarettes if you want." "Well, well, well," someone said. "Haven't seen you around here much lately, James. Been hiding from me?" It was Greg Jennings and 2 of his mates. "I've been looking everywhere for you," Greg said. "I knew you couldn't hide that nasty little face forever." The 3 boys squared up to James, all of them about twice his size. Greg put the toe of his trainer on the swing between James's legs. "My sister has a scar on her face thanks to you. The only thing that cheered her up was finding out that your pig mother dropped dead." "Leave her out of this," James said angrily, bunching up his fist. "Oh no," Greg said, putting on a high-pitched voice. "The little faggot's gonna hit me. I'm so scared." A small rock bounced off Greg's head. "Hey, turd," Bruce shouted. "Why don't you pick on someone your own size? Like me?" Greg turned around and couldn't believe that such a skinny little kid was being so brave. "Get out of here," Greg said, pointing at Bruce. "Unless you want your legs smashed." Bruce tossed another rock at Greg's head. James laughed. Greg gave James a slap, then spoke to his 2 sidekicks. "Snap that little idiot in half." James knew Bruce was a good fighter, but he was only 11, and the 2 guys sizing up to him were massive. Kyle was nowhere to be seen. Bruce backed into the roundabout, holding his hands out meekly, acting scared. He grabbed the rails on the roundabout and sprung his whole body behind a 2-footed kick. One of the thugs crumpled up. Kyle jumped out from behind the roundabout and barged the thug over, then smashed him with an elbow that burst his nose and left him unconscious. Meanwhile, Bruce had taken on the other one. The kid plucked Bruce off the ground. Bruce kicked him in the balls, then put a sharp pinch on his neck. He'd been trained to target the main vein running up the side of the neck. It caused an instant build-up of blood in the thug's head. He passed out and hit the ground like a falling tree, with Bruce holding on. Bruce clambered out from under his victim and ran towards Greg Jennings. Greg still had his trainer pressed in James's crotch. There was a weird look on Greg's face, like his brain wasn't believing what his eyes were seeing. Greg reached inside his coat. James realized he was going for a knife. He dived backwards off the swing and grabbed Lauren. Greg pulled the knife. Bruce faced him off. "I'll stick that knife in you if you don't put it down," Bruce said. Greg lunged forward with the blade. Bruce stepped backwards. Greg lunged again. Bruce sidestepped. Bruce reached into his pocket and pulled out a coin. The next time Greg moved, Bruce threw the coin in Greg's face. Greg didn't know what was coming towards him and blocked the coin with his free hand. Bruce used the distraction to grab Greg's wrist, twist his thumb into a lock and slide out the knife. Now they were back facing each other. Only Bruce was the one holding the knife. "I'll stick this knife in you if you don't start running," Bruce said. Greg was too proud to run, but he walked off fast. Lauren ran over to Bruce. "That was something out of Jackie Chan," she said. "You're the best fighter ever." "I like to think so," Bruce said casually. tucking his coin back in his pocket. At least for my age. James was amazed. First, Kyle had set the whole day up for him. Now Bruce had saved him from a beating. "You guys are great," James said. "I owe both of you." "I'll settle for cash," Kyle said, looking at the dirt on his trousers. "These are Billabong trousers. 60 quid they cost, and they're filthy." "You know what I really want?" Bruce said. "Some business cards with Bruce Norris kicked your ass printed on them. I can stick them in people's mouths when I knock them unconscious, just in case they don't remember me when they come around." "Bruce, what you need," Kyle said, "is some serious time with the psychiatrist." The kids were gathered in a quiet corner of the car park outside Edgware Station. Dennis King passed out copies of the mission briefing. "You all know the deal," he said. "Read the mission and sign your name at the bottom if you want to come along." "Don't sign it, James," Kyle whispered. "Remember, you're not supposed to be here." Classified mission briefing. Target, Bishops Avenue, London, home of Solomon Gold, owner of Armaments Exchange. Gold is suspected of illegally selling American-made tank-buster missiles to terrorist groups in Palestine and Angola. Objectives. Solomon Gold has gone away for the weekend. His home is protected by a 2-man security post. Gas will be released inside the post. The gas will make the guards sleep for about 3 hours. This task will be undertaken by an MI5 agent posing as the security guard's supervisor. Mr. Gold is highly suspicious. The area around his house is monitored by 36 video cameras. Adult intruders will be suspected of being MI5 agents or undercover police. A decision has been taken to use CHERUB operatives, who must behave like vandals to minimize suspicion. CHERUB operatives will enter the house through the main gate. 3 operatives will search the office on the first floor for documents and make copies using handheld photocopiers. 6 operatives will be issued with spray paint, bats, and hammers. Their objective is to damage fixtures and fittings, creating the impression that the only intention was mindless vandalism. Afterwards, all CHERUB operatives should leave the scene and meet at an agreed point 2 kilometers from the break-in. Local police have no knowledge of this operation. If an operative is arrested, they should give false identification details and await release. Bishops Avenue was locally known as Millionaires Row, though Billionaires was more like it. The houses were all massive. Most were set back behind 6-meter-high walls. Video cameras stared in every direction. A bus dropped the 10 kids a few streets away. Solomon Gold's house was 15 minutes' walk. James, Bruce, and Kyle were at the back of the group, walking fast. It was dark and raining hard. "You excited?" Kyle asked. "Nervous," James said. "It said in the briefing about getting arrested. If I get arrested, they'll know I'm on the mission." "Try not to get arrested then," Kyle said. "Bruce will look after you." "What about you?" James asked. "I'm upstairs photocopying documents." "Boring," Bruce said. "We get to smash stuff up. It's gonna rock." Ever since the fight, Bruce had been in the best mood. "I thought missions would all be sneaking around and stuff," James said. "Not bursting in the front door and trashing the joint." "What?" Kyle said. "A bunch of 12-year-olds creeping around in balaclavas and gloves, disabling burglar alarms and cutting holes in windows? Can you think of anything more likely to attract attention? The first thing you'll learn in basic training is that a cherub always has to act like a normal kid." Bruce laughed. "Cherub has a 50-year tradition of mayhem and destruction." "I never realized," James said. "Cool." The girl leading them stopped by an open metal gate. She was called Jenny. 15 years old, she was mission leader. "Everyone inside," Jenny said. James stepped through the gate last. He noticed the security guards asleep in their glass booth. A couple of kids were already in there grabbing the house keys. "We've got 20 minutes, Jenny whispered. "Keep the noise down and pull the curtains or blinds before you turn any lights on. The only exit is back the way we came. so if the police turn up, we're all spending the night in a cell. It was 100 metres along a path lined with sculpted hedges to the house. The hallway was huge. Kyle took a mini photocopier out of his backpack and ran upstairs to find the office. James and Bruce found the kitchen. Bruce opened the fridge, which was empty except for a packet of cream cakes and some milk. "Thank you," Bruce said, stuffing a whole cake in his gob and glugging the milk. "I'm starving." James popped the top off his aerosol paint and started spraying Arsenal in metre-high letters on the kitchen units. Bruce found the crockery cupboard and tipped it all onto the floor. James stomped the few plates and cups that weren't already broken. A girl came in. "Bruce, James, come and help us out." They ran after the girl to the swimming pool. A few plastic chairs had already been thrown in. 2 kids were trying to move a grand piano. "Come on, help us." 5 kids, including Bruce and James, lined up behind the piano and pushed it into the pool. A great wave of water sprayed up. The piano hit the bottom of the pool, making a crack in the tiles before floating back to the surface. Bruce leapt onto the floating piano, pulled down the front of his tracksuit bottoms, and started pissing in the pool. Before he finished, a huge air bubble burst out from under the piano lid and capsized it. Bruce fell in and swam to the side. James and the others were cracking up. They all ran to the living room. James tucked some DVDs in his jacket, then picked up a little coffee table and used it to destroy the plasma TV hanging on the wall. The room stank from all the aerosol paint that was being sprayed. James was smashing ornaments and really getting into the swing of mindless destruction when a deafening alarm sounded and the room started filling with purple smoke. Jenny was shouting from the hallway, "Everybody get the hell out of here!" "Stay with me, James," Bruce shouted. They ran through the hallway. Jenny counted them out of the main gate. "Run away," she shouted. "Split up." James and Bruce sprinted up Bishop's Avenue. 2 police vans were heading towards them. "Walk," Bruce said. "It looks less suspicious." The vans sped past. James's skin and clothes were stained purple from the smoke. "What's this stuff?" James asked. "Never seen it before. Probably harmless. Food dye or something," Bruce said. "Whoever did the security survey on that house messed up big time." "There's none on you," James said. "I suppose it didn't stick to me because I'm still wet from the pool." "What about Kyle? Did you see him?" "He was upstairs. He wouldn't have gotten out before us. Probably been nabbed. Better start running again. Those cops saw us. It won't take them long to work out what's going on and come back for us." Chapter 16. Penalty. "This is beyond stupid. This is beyond a shambles. And you 3. I'm lost for words. You're the biggest idiots of the lot, aren't you?" Mac was pacing up and down his office, not happy. Kyle, Bruce and James kept sinking lower in their chairs. Kyle had a black eye and his arm in a sling. He'd punched a policewoman trying to escape. Her 3 colleagues got revenge when he was handcuffed in the back of the police van. "We never messed up the security survey," Kyle blurted. "That was MI5's fault." "The security survey was fine," Max said. "The alarm was deactivated. Unfortunately, some idiots cracked the bottom of the swimming pool with a grand piano, and the leaking water caused the security system to short circuit. That's what set off the alarm and smoke." James and Bruce sank lower still. "So, your punishments. What's it to be?" "Kyle, you messed up in the Caribbean. You messed up at Nebraska House. Now you mess up here," Max said. "You told me I did a good job when I got back from Nebraska House," Kyle whined. "When you first got back, Kyle. Then 2 days later, I hear from Jennifer Mitchum that the social workers want you punished. Something about filling someone's room up with sand and spraying coke everywhere." "Oh, that," Kyle said. "The guy was a dick. You and James were supposed to disappear quietly. No questions asked. I don't like answering questions about where you've gone. I'm sending you on another recruitment mission, Kyle. No, Kyle said. A delightful children's home in a rundown area of Glasgow. I understand kids with English accents are particularly unpopular there. I won't do it, Kyle said. Do it, or I'll put you in a foster home. Kyle looked shocked. You can't kick me out, he said. I can, and I will, Kyle. Pack your stuff and get on the train to Glasgow tomorrow morning, or you're out of CHERUB for good. So, Bruce. Bruce sat up in his chair. Why did you go along with Kyle's idea to take James on the mission? Oh, because I'm a total idiot, Bruce said. Mac laughed. Good answer. You spend a lot of time in the dojo, don't you? Yeah, Bruce said. For the next 3 months, you're suspended from missions. I want you in the dojo at the end of every day. Wash the floors, polish the mirrors, tidy the changing rooms, and load all the towels and stinking kit into the washing machines. Then, in the morning, unload all the kit, put it in the dryers, and fold it ready for use. She'll take 3 hours a day, if you work fast. Fine, Bruce said. But he didn't look fine. Now, James. James was nervous. He didn't know where to look. You're new here. Keen to make friends. 2 qualified agents put you up to something. Basic training starts in a few days and should straighten you out. You get away with this one. But next time I'll come down like a hammer. Understood? Yes, Mac. I'm Mac on a good day, James. Today you call me Dr. McAfferty. Or Doctor. Got that? Yes, Doctor. James couldn't stop a little smile. Then he saw how upset Kyle and Bruce looked and straightened his face. Bruce, Kyle, you can go, Max said. They walked out. I understand you went to London to see your sister, Max said. Yes, James said. I know I shouldn't have, but I wanted to see her before Christmas. I wasn't aware you had difficulty getting access. I'll try and sort something out. My stepdad doesn't want me near her. I can be very persuasive, Max said. I can't make any promises, but I'll do my best. Thanks, James said. I know it's not my place, but I think you're being too hard on Kyle. He only wanted to help me see Lauren. He's nearly 14. Kyle should be in a Navy shirt doing the most difficult missions. Instead, he keeps making silly errors of judgment. If you'd come and asked me, I would have let you go and see your sister. You could have waited at the station while the others went on the mission. Have you swum your 50 meters yet? No, James said. Only 5 days to go, James. I won't be happy if you fail.